Okay, so hello. Today is the 2nd of February 2022, and I will make two presentations on this day. One about Alberto Sartoris, an important and enigmatic architect, and also about architecture and two-ness, or architecture and duality, or Yin and Yang and architecture. I could have chosen various titles. I settled for architecture and two-ness, which wrongly I identified as being the invention, the word two-ness as being the invention of Peter Eisenman, because that's where I knew the word from a lecture he gave and from some of his writings. Well, I found out today that actually the word two-ness exists even in the English language dictionary. So obviously it wasn't him who invented it. So I apologize for the wrong information I gave. But let's begin with Alberto Sartoris. Yeah, here he is. Here he was as a young man, and you know, rather handsome, as Italians often are. Hard to resist, and he lived a long life, and he led an interesting life in architecture as well. Interesting enough to have Kenneth Frampton choose an image he generated, Alberto Sartoris, on the cover of his famous book, Modern Architecture, A Critical History. Here is a picture of him in his older age. And let's read a little bit about him. He was born today. Here it is not written. I have three alternative descriptions of him. Sartoris Alberto Sartoris, Italian architect. Early in his career, he was associated with Futurism, and in 1928 was a founder member of the CIAM, which is Congrès International d'Architecture Moderne. In the late 1920s, he became closely involved with Italian rationalism and built numerous structures, mostly in Switzerland. I don't know if they were so numerous, because I really had a very, very hard time to find images with at least some of those so-called numerous structures. In 1938, he was associated with Giuseppe Terragni in the design of a satellite city at Reggio in Como, 1938, 1939. He also built a building done together with Giuseppe Terragni, and we are going to see it today. Among his works, the Maurer Pasteur House in Saillon-Valais in Switzerland, which we are going to see, earned him acclaim for its international style aesthetic. A devotee of functionalism, he published Gli elementi dell'architettura funzionale, various editions, and Encyclopédie de l'Architecture Nouvelle, the Encyclopedia of the New Architecture, 1948-1954. Here is in French, but here I found some other information about him anyway. I'm not translating it because I kind of said what I had to say in the first one. And here is another one, some new information about him. Paper architectures was the phrase Alberto Sartoris used to designate his unbuilt projects, not built in stone, but made transcendent in graphic mode. Indeed, his axonometric projections become works of art where the borders between painting and architecture are blurred. Sartoris has, however, several completed projects in his portfolio, notably in the Lake Geneva region in Switzerland, the Motel de Blonès at Cully, now called the Hotel Lavaux, which we are going to see, and the Cercle de l'Hermitage at Épès, which also we are going to see, better known as the Old Mill. After many excesses involving mock beams, rough plastering, and wrought iron, the circle has undergone a rehabilitation to restore it to the design created by Sartoris in 1935. We can also point to the Villa de Grandi at Corso, the church at Lortier, which we are going to see, which was the first modern church built in an Alpine setting, and the Maison du Peuple at Vevey, the building houses the Cinema Rex today. Okay, so let's go to les images, to the images. But before we go to the images, let's remember these two aphorisms from him. The color is the fourth dimension of architecture. I found the text in French, la couleur est la quatrième dimension de l'architecture. So color, he thought, is the fourth dimension of architecture. Then another one, nature has 4 seasons. Architecture has only 2, the shadow and light. Okay, so let's see. This was the man younger in his younger years. As I said, it is obvious for all to see that he had a certain seductiveness about him. Maybe this helped him to live a very long life. Some drawings, and we begin with the famous cover page of the famous book by Kenneth Frampton, Modern History, Critical Modern Architecture, Critical History. No, sorry, I thought I put this is it. We all know it. What you do not know, perhaps, is that this modern building here was made for a project for a, surprise, surprise, a church. It doesn't look like a church, does it? But this was an axonometric rendering or presentation or drawing by Alberto Sartoris. So this should be known that, and I'm sure Kenneth Frampton didn't choose it accidentally. He probably wanted to make a statement. Maybe the statement would be that we kill the sacred, that, you know, if a church is conceived in this way, you can imagine. You can imagine our world. So maybe we should renounce using the word sacred for a while, maybe for a long while, maybe even forever. I don't want to sound cynical, but I think we abuse this word in as much as we abuse other words, like love, for example. Maybe the more we abstain from using these words, maybe the more we mean them. Anyway, let's look at some of these representations, which earned him the appreciation of those who loved art, even if they are supposed to be architecture, but between art and architecture, sometimes at least there shouldn't be a strong frontier. One thing is for sure, his mode of representing architectural projects is somewhat unconventional, because they are not renderings per se. There is a level of abstractness, but he was not the only one to work in this way. Anyway, also you see the fourth dimension of architecture, meaning color, in his conception. Again, in this, he was also not alone. There's still in the Netherlands, you know, architects used color in similar ways. Now here we don't see color, do we? But he was, you know, experimenting with all kinds of things. Anyway, Alberto Sartoris also painted, and actually his paintings are the very opposite of what we look at here, and we are going to see some of his paintings. When I use the word enigmatic vis-a-vis Alberto Sartoris, it's not just because he is enigmatic for me, meaning an enigma for me. I think he is an architect, an important architect, but for some reason, he's a little bit less known, at least in some circles, perhaps the wider circles. But Alberto Sartoris also puzzles because on one hand, he is considered a functionalist, and on the other hand, you cannot truly say that these renderings or these drawings really represent the work of a functionalist. And after you see his paintings, you wonder, you know, this is how a functionalist paints. So I think he had dualities. Maybe he's very properly, you know, appropriate to talk about on the 2nd of February 2022. I mean, there are besides the 0 in the 2022, all the other numbers are 2, or you know, it's just the number 2. That's why I thought of talking about architecture and two-ness, or architecture and duality, and so on. Anyway, he was an interesting architect, and I think he was able to advocate the cause of a plastic functionalism, somehow an abstract functionalism. In my opinion, he was a dreamer, and he was able somehow to create for himself this, you know, qualification, or I don't know how to call it, that he was a functionalist. I'm not so sure about that, but it depends what we understand by the word function or functionalist. Now look at his painting, one of his paintings, and I think he was very good as a painter as well. But you look at this work, and then you look at this work, and you wonder, you know, are they made by the same person? Yes, they are made by the same person. I think he was at heart an artist, and even this architectural drawing shows it. You know, do we see cars here? Do we see, you know, seductive people? Do we see trees and tumultuous clouds? No, it's a very abstract image. Yes, it's perspectival in this case, but most of the time he used axonometric representations, like here. Anyway, again, painting by Alberto Sartoris, who made it to the cover of the famous book by Kenneth Frampton. Another painting, and these paintings are actually show almost a dark disposition of the soul, if we are to say so. They are abstract, but you know, while the axonometric architectural drawings are rather, you know, luminous with primary colors, here we see something else, rather ominous. Even here, mysteriously, you know, foggy. I like his paintings. I like his axonometric representations as well. I only regret he didn't build so much, despite that presentation at the beginning, which said build numerous structures. But how come I couldn't find them on the web? Another artwork by him, Alberto Sartoris, the mysterious architect born in Turin in Italy, but being active mostly in Switzerland. I like architects who also do art, you know, because, and they do art not just as a compensation for a boring architectural work, but they bring a different sensitivity to architecture, I think, as well. And he was a good painter, really. I mean, I discovered his paintings today. I didn't know he was painting, but you know, these are not the paintings of an unknowing person. I understood he also taught, and he was you know, very interested in art, and maybe he taught art as well. Anyway, Alberto Sartoris, we saw this in a larger picture. Another dancing of the lines. We see in the left corner his signature, like architects sign, actually, with clearly defined capital letters. And now, surprise, surprise, the axonometric drawing of the painter. Look at the you know, lyrical graphism of this, let's call it painting, and this work, the same person. Yeah, the same person indeed. Okay, so let's look at Hotel Lavaux. This is a building that exists and functions in Switzerland. I begin maybe in an uninspired way with a view from the interior. You know, this is a Swiss hotel. It's not the most affordable hotel in the world, but you know, you pay for looking at those magnificent mountains in the distance and having the huge balcony in front of it, in front of your suite. Now, I don't know if he did this. This is exactly what he, you know, designed and built. The building received an extensive renovation, so it's possible some things had been, you know, modified a little bit, if not to say improved, but the building is his and is recognized as such, and it is indeed appears to be so-called functional. You know, if I function now this picture, that's how I found it, but at that time, obviously, they didn't write from right to left. They wrote from left to right, but the picture is in reverse. Anyway, this is the build. Yeah, it would be published without doubt in Arch Daily. It would. But it was made more than 80 years ago, before the war. And yes, it has a clarity, almost surreal clarity. And this is interesting because it is said that the opposites that, you know, an excess in one direction becomes the very opposite. Like when you put your hand in snow, and the first feeling you have is that it is hot, that is you know, burning your fingers, and in fact it's snow. And here we have the so-called functionalist, but a functionalism which is pushed to an extreme and becomes almost the opposite. It could be read as almost having a surreal clarity. Yes, it must be beautiful, of course, to spend some days here and some nights, and maybe the longer the better, maybe. Anyway, this is the building. It's not so white here, but, or the picture, something wrong with the picture is possible, but the landscape is magnificent. Anyway, moving forward. Today I thought of the expression anthropic architecture. All architecture is perhaps anthropic. Maybe Alvar Aalto was right. You know, architecture is built for man, but its majesty or his majesty, man, in my opinion, should be curbed lately. Although this room is telling me that I'm totally wrong. And it's possible I'm wrong. I mean, when you look at this interior and the mountains in the distance and the comfort and the flowers in the vase and everything proclaims life is beautiful. There is luxe, calme et volupté on earth, to use the words of Charles Baudelaire. Even the conference room, or I don't know what it is, maybe this is, yeah, I guess it's some kind of a, I don't know, maybe they eat here. I'm a little bit confused because I see their laptop, but then I don't know, whatever it is. It does say, welcome to Hotel Lavaux. And Hotel Lavaux it is, by Alberto Sartoris, splendidly white and immaculate. Okay. We saw something like this again, splendor in the corner. It seems to be the corner of the building, and look, it's everything is under control. You know, when you look at this room, you wouldn't think that Putin is at the frontier with Ukraine with more than 100,000 soldiers, would you? But he's not at the frontier of Switzerland. He's at the frontier of Ukraine. That might explain the difference. Yeah. Alberto Sartoris today. Now, the old mill, Vieux Moulin, old mill is here is not very clear to me. It looks like an old building. He did some modern, almost alarmingly modern interventions inside an old building. I don't know if he built it in this way. Again, it's a little bit mysterious. Like this is the building, you know, if you can imagine, in Switzerland, the building which is, you know, dirty, to use the you know, the brutal word. Was it built like this by Alberto Sartoris? I don't know. I didn't yet give me my, I didn't get my PhD on Alberto Sartoris. But even if it was an existing building, it looks interesting, especially here, you know, a rounded corner. And then, you know, the roofing is ignoring the roundness of the corner and is doing its rectangular business. And inside, though, you will be surprised. So please remember this image when you look at this image. Here is still some, you know, there are some echoes from the outside, but not here or here. Apparently, that's what he did inside that, I would say, an existing old building. And it was this one restored as well, with that scrupulousness that the Swiss have in everything they do. I like particularly this image. I don't know exactly what's going on. It's still during the construction, but this image reminds me of his paintings, actually, although it's architecture, obviously, and, you know, with straight lines. But it's something dark and ominous and, you know, beyond the rectangularity of it all, there is almost a sense of disorder. Not so much here, not so much here. Anyway, Alberto Sartoris was a man, I think, of contradictions. Now, I don't know, we see those things, the éclairage artificiel, the éclairage naturel. It's, you know, architects do this sort of thing to seduce the client into believing that he or she will get the building of the buildings ever built. Yeah, but look at the landscape. You know, it's dramatic, to say the least. Anyway, Switzerland does have mountains and hills and all the rest. We saw it from the outside, now we see it from the inside. Okay, and now here is the young man staring at another building he built, and we are going to see it. He published, his work was published, like this building I like, but I couldn't find any other images of it. I don't know how it is called. I don't even know if it is by him. No, it's not. I see now there Carlo something. He published, as I read, an encyclopedia of modern architecture, which meant for him functionalist architecture. The way architects we never, I mean, I never heard of, like this one, but the building is not bad. I guess I should amplify this image and see better what's written there and search for that architect and others like him. Now, the Church of Notre Dame du Bon Conseil in Lourtier in Switzerland, again, from almost, well, more than 80 years ago, although it was completed after the Second World War, but began in 1932. It was modified, actually, but that's how he built it. The only suggestion that it is a church is this cross here. Otherwise, you wouldn't think it's a church, would you? Yeah, it was modified, the roof, and I regret now I didn't include because I was a little bit confused. I thought he built two churches very similar, but in looking more carefully, I arrived at the conclusion they created larger windows here, like 2 rows of windows, and then with a roof with, with two sloping planes. But this is how he built it. Alberto Sartoris. This is though an interesting, I guess he liked to do these axonometrics for churches. And this is another one, I wish it was built, but it was not built. Anyway, we have this drawing of it. And again, the only, sign that it might be a church is the cross at the top of that narrow and tall cylinder. That's it. Otherwise, well, you could have said that the gods might have seen it as a church from the sky, or the pilots of airplanes, or whoever looked from the airplanes downwards, if it was built, but it was not built. Anyway, L'Atelier de Grandy in, actually I typed wrongly here, is an O, Cosso, 1939. It's a splendidly luminous and modern functionalist building, but you wonder sometimes, is snow hot? Is snow cold? Yeah, I guess it's functional, but who knows? I am not so sure that these words are always telling the undisputable truth. Because even here you see concerns with the form, it's not just about function. Like this rather audacious balcony, which needed, this column here to be supported, didn't need to be so, outgoing, but something made Sartoris make it in this way. It's a good building. It's a good building, I think. Although I don't like white architecture, but too much. But in this case, somehow I accept it. I don't like it so much today. At that time when it was built, I guess there was some justification. But to continue to be like this almost 100 years later, I don't know. It's to me a little bit repetitive and without imagination. Maison du Peuple, the House of the People, which became a cinema. We are approaching the end of this short introduction into the work of Alberto Sartoris. It's really hard to find many images of his work on the web. I searched a lot. Even here, I'm not so sure. Is this the building? I think it is the building that he built for the House of the People, and it became a cinema. But I'm not very sure. I think it is. Anyway, it does look a little bit like a building. I don't know. I'm joking. Does it look like the House of the People? Actually, I'm attached to this building because I built myself a building in Romania, very similar to this one in the corner. And if you pass through the corner, just like here, you reach the cinema. It's true. It's true. I did it. To those who want to see it, I could even send an image. There was a block of flat here, and there was a block of flats here, and I had to connect them. And I did it with a round building like this, and with an exterior corridor on the other side, which accessed apartments opening towards south, just like maybe, I don't know what the cardinal points here, but I do see the sunlight touching the elevation of this corner, opening like fans towards, in my case, it was south. Anyway, nostalgia. Villa Morin Pasteur, 1933, 1935. Well, it seems most buildings that I found images of were built before the Second World War, but the man lived a very long life. I don't know what he was doing. I think he was a dreamer. This is the house during the process of renovation. I have another picture of it, other two pictures of it. Here it is. I like the contrast between this building and this building. they are. I understood, I read that he was considered too modern, too radical in his modernism. Well, I can understand. I mean, if I lived in this house and stared at the outside from this window, or even better from this little window, and saw this building in front of me, I would have been a little bit provoked, I would say. I would have felt a little bit uneasy in this building. I don't think I could have continued to live in it after Sartoris with his wild white splendor in the grass here in Switzerland. Here is another image. I think it is the place where Le Corbusier built his building du Lac, in the same place in Switzerland. Anyway, moving forward, housing, and with this I end this presentation on Sartoris. Housing via Ansani in Como in Italy. It was done by him and Giuseppe Terragni. Giuseppe Terragni, a very important Italian architect, rationalist and all, but I'm suspecting that there is an irrationality of rationalism. I'm not trying to say that what you are going to see is irrational, because it's not. But pushed to an extreme, what we call rational, could become irrational. You can be, this is my conviction, irrational, where you push reason, push reason to an extreme, and then it becomes its opposite. Just like, you know, the example I try to give with snow. Anyway, please remember this name, Giuseppe Terragni, truly a very important architect who, yes, built Casa del Fascio, the house of the fascism in Como, a very important building itself. And he was a brilliant architect who also designed, I think he was asked by Mussolini to imagine the house of Dante Alighieri, and he had a brilliant project which was not built. But again, this is a very important architect, Giuseppe Terragni, and Alberto Sartoris worked with him, and the birthday of Giuseppe Terragni will be in March, and we'll pay homage to him as well, because he deserves it. Not for his sympathizing with the fascists, but for the quality of his architecture. It's a block of flats, nothing impressive. Maybe, you know, underprivileged people live here. It's possible. But it was done by two architects, you know, of some importance. And Giuseppe Terragni is more than just of some importance. And I think Alberto Sartoris as well. It's possible that here is also about an exterior corridor, which I would always advocate, because it's so easy to create, you know, livable spaces if you access an apartment from an exterior corridor, because it gives you cross ventilation and the luxury of facing two cardinal points, which is not a little thing. This is the sketched plan that I found. Not impressive, perhaps. I mean, not very clear, but you still kind of get the idea. You know, you access the apartments from the exterior corridor, and again, this works. I think we should use more this in Romania. Actually, it began to be used. I saw a project published on Arch Daily recently, just a few days ago, with such a building with the exterior corridor. These were probably the original drawings, or at least at a certain phase in the development of the project. Giuseppe Terragni and Alberto Sartoris, and a few more images. Yes, it doesn't look, you know, excessively, you know, seductive, but it is to be noticed the window, you know, the vertical window, rather narrow, rather tall, with oblongs. And the oblongs is a device I would welcome back in architecture, especially for housing projects, because oblongs are indeed very functional. They block excessive noise, they block excessive light, and they even add, when they are open, variety of the facade, which is not so obvious here because they are, maybe this building is not inhabited any longer. It's very possible. Anyway, the axonometric of this, actually there are 3 buildings, as you can see, built by Terragni and Alberto Sartoris. Another image in Como. It can be still seen if the pandemic goes away and we can travel again to beautiful Italy. Now, of course, many people would protest such an idea to have an exterior corridor, which, I mean, anyone from outside could enter here and whatever. But I think, you know, life is more complex, and you know, to think only in these terms of fear of thieves, fear of what. You know, what about the community? I mean, here there are people living together, and no, I don't think this would be, you know, unmanageable, so to speak, from this point of view. Terragni and Sartoris, and the trees beautiful as ever. Okay, and now we go to the second presentation with a subject I invented for myself today because I am restless. But it's an interesting subject, architecture and duality, or architecture, I called it architecture and two-ness, because today indeed is a special day, the 2nd of February, 2022. You don't have to be, you know, mystic of numbers, or to believe in the mysticism of numbers, in order to be rather, you know, amused, if nothing else, by the persistent presence of the number 2 in today's date, 0202 2022. So that's the only reason I thought of talking, and literally this is such a vast subject that I could easily write several books, thick books, big books on this subject. Here I only have about 100 pictures, is an introduction, so to speak, into the subject, but an interesting, I think an interesting topic. Architecture and two-ness. And as I told you, I thought that Peter Eisenman invented the word because I always describe this word as being a linguistic exasperation. Well, I was wrong. The word existed. I didn't search for its etymology, and I don't know when it came into being, but it is in the Webster dictionary. This word exists, two-ness. So we begin with the Duality Pavilion because, yes, today is the day of dualities. It's the day, you know, Emperor 2 or number 2. It's ruling the world today. So the Duality Pavilion was built by this team of architects, PCDO, in this place in Ecuador. And I think it's a good building. But let's read a little bit about it. They said, the architects, we interpreted the contrast between black and white as duality, two forces infinitely opposed and incompatible, which can be observed on opposite sides of each layer that interlocked assemble the pavilion. However, duality is also a converging point where these opposing forces intertwine, taking the best of both worlds to achieve integrity and balance. The edges of the laminated pieces depend on the structural function of the whole. Dimensions throughout vary between 20 and 140 centimeters. We are going to look at it, but when you talk about duality or two-ness, you talk about two entities, most of the time opposed to each other, and how to bring them together, like in Yin and Yang in China. And I will make some references to Yin and Yang because I think it is the proper thing to do for such a subject. But let's look at the pavilion. I think it's a remarkable pavilion, almost as remarkable as the trees. And it is built both rationally and irrationally. It's some kind of a curved or curvaceous grid. It's a curved grid. They are not the only ones working like this, but you see some interesting things are built outside of the European Western world, or the United States of America, or Japan, or China, and a few other places. You can find interesting architecture built. In fact, I discovered today an astonishing building built in Iran. Parametric design, extremely extreme. You know, I mean, I was very surprised, you know, that a country that an enlightened American president like George Bush placed on the axis of evil together with North Korea and Iraq. Well, in Iran, there are very good architects, and there were very good architects. I mean, let's not forget, Iran had at its base in the past, you know, the Persian culture. I mean, it's a very old culture, and I'm still expecting great cultural surprises in the good sense of the word from Iran. I mean, I had one today. I mean, not today, this year, when I received a project for a house for Dante Alighieri from Iran. The best project I received. I didn't receive too many, but the best came from Iran. And you wonder, what does Iran have to do with Dante Alighieri? Well, it seems they had and have to do more than we think and more than we do, sadly as it is. This, you see, it's a grid, but because of the manipulations of this grid in terms of you know, curvatures and roundness and fluidity, it becomes something else. When you look at the plan, you say, well, so what? It's a you know, bi-dimensional representation of a clear grid, and that's it. Well, in reality, it's not so simple. That's why the plan can be misleading. They created roundness, so to speak, out of straightness, you know, out of rectangularity, because the plan, as you saw, it's a grid, but the spatial reality of the pavilion is different. And here are the elevations. Can you do this manually? Would perhaps, but with some hardships and struggles. It would help if you use the technology of today. Ecuador. I guess the two-ness is about the fact, not just about the tension and the conflict between white and black, but also between rectangularity and circularity, between straight lines and curvature. And that's what they were able to do, you know, with a clear grid. They created a pavilion which doesn't seem oppressively grid-like. And here we see, you know, entities that compose together. And you see there is a lot of work here to assemble these things, but they did. And I think it looks fine also at night. Yeah, here are other drawings for this pavilion built in Ecuador. When we talk about two-ness or duality, almost inevitably, we also talk about conflict. Why? Because number two is formed from, let's say, 1 plus 1. And if those one, each one has its own individuality, then when you put them together, the conflict might arise very easily. So, you know, like the conflict between, so-called the conflict between the square and the circle. And in most churches of the past, the great challenge was to start from the earth, symbolized by the cube or the square, and then move towards the roundness of the divine or the celestial. And so the terrestrial and the celestial, the duality of the terrestrial and the celestial were externalized, represented, and symbolized by the cube, which became rounded at the top, and the culmination was often a dome. Here we also see the tension between the rectangularity of the grid and the roundness of you know, of the final work that they aspire towards. Now, the Romeo and Juliet windmill by Frank Lloyd Wright. Yes, he did build when he was young such a tower, narrow and tall, called Romeo and Juliet, and you'll understand why he called it Romeo and Juliet when you look at the plan. It's again about the masculine principle and the feminine principle. Or maybe I should have said the feminine principle and the masculine principle, the conjunction of two forces that oppose each other but need each other, and ideally embrace each other and love each other and become one. But to become one out of two is not easy, as everybody who went through a love affair knows. Maybe the French were right. Il n'y a pas d'amour heureux. There is no happy love. But we should continue to hope that there is. And this is the challenge of life, in a way, to make peace between two opposing entities or forces or beings. Now, the Romeo and Juliet windmill by Frank Lloyd Wright looks like this at the top. But you'll understand, maybe it's too explicit, and I could use some other words, the plan, but here is, unfortunately, the resolution of the picture is not great, but you see, I think he made this rendering, although it doesn't quite look like a drawing by Frank Lloyd Wright. Anyway, here is the plan. You know, I don't know what was wrong with Frank Lloyd Wright then, because the plan is descriptively erotical. He was a married man. He had many children. Why was he thinking of this? You know, of Romeo and Juliet in this way? Anyway, he did windmill, and here it is. We can speculate when we look at this tower, you know, and we see at the top this thing, and you know, there are many things here that can be interpreted symbolically. You know, it's, yes, there is love, yes, there is tension, but there is also the wheel of fortune or lack of fortune, you know, the destiny which plays with us, and you know, the predictability of love is something almost not existent. You know, in fact, there was a poet who said that it is in the very nature of love to be unpredictable, to be insecure, to be unstable. And here we have a picture, you know, of a couple probably in love, let's hope so. And then in the back, the Romeo and Juliet tower, with Romeo and Juliet needing each other. But then, anyway, I thought of showing this work too. I wonder what these three feels, thinks about the human drama. Although I don't know there's something wrong with this picture. Why is this thing here? I think it was you know, doctored. It's an image that was doctored. At the top, that's not what exists on this building. And what existed is somewhere here. Anyway, forget this. Now, the yin and yang in architecture, this is a fascinating subject, I think. There are probably books written on this subject. First of all, what is the yin and what is the yang? Probably you know. Here it is, one diagram. You know, you have again the two-ness expressed in this way, and it can be expressed in some other way. You know, on one hand, you have, I don't know, actually, I don't like, I didn't look carefully at the writing here, but I don't like it. I prefer this one, the next one, although the next one has a problem graphically, it's not so seductive. I don't know why it doesn't advance this. Here. So the yin is considered the feminine, Juliet, if you want. Yang is considered the masculine, Romeo. Let's read. So the yin is described as being negative, female, night, passive, moon, intuitive, cold, and soft. While Romeo, the yang, is described as being positive, male, day, active, sun, logical, hot, and hard. Well, I don't know. I mean, yes, I always knew that the woman is considered to be the moon and the male is considered to be the sun. But this is might not be true in Japan, where the sun goddess is a goddess. It's not a god. It's Amaterasu. So, you know, things are relative. You know, is the woman the moon? Usually mythologically, she is considered, yes, the moon, and the man, the sun. But again, things change. You know, the hot becomes cold and the cold becomes hot. And is the male truly hot and the woman cold? I would feel tempted to think the opposite. You know, I think men, because of their reason, their logical stance, they are rather cold compared to the intuitive woman. So, but there is some truth in what we look at. And yet certain things, is the woman passive? I'm not so sure about this. They actually move the world. It's even known that behind any so-called successful man, there is an energetic woman. You know, that things are also, it's about appearance. Someone who might appear to be passive would actually, you know, change the, you know, the position and the movement of the stars. In the case the stars move, I'm not sure they do. Anyway, there are pairs of opposites here that are worth contemplating: negative, positive, female, male, night, day, passive, active, moon, sun, intuitive, logical, cold, hot, and soft, hard. I used to work with these opposites. I have some projects. I didn't include them here because I showed them at other times and I didn't want to become, you know, self-promoting, so to speak. But I did read that in Psychology and Alchemy, a book which I like by Carl Jung, that the woman is symbolized by or symbolizes the moon, north, Mercury, and all kinds of attributes relating to the feminine, while the masculine is connected with the sun, with south, and so on. Anyway, with what is written here as being the sun, the active, the day, and the woman is connected with the night. Who knows? Who knows if these pairs of opposites are truly as simplistically defined in this diagram. Anyway, let's look at the Panda House by B. Actually, Bjarke Ingels, in my opinion, is an architect who, although he claimed, and maybe justifiably, that he was inspired by Lego, and his architecture shows this to an extent. I think what saves his architecture from being, too simplistic is exactly his ability to incorporate in his work even dynamic, understandings, or I try to avoid the word concepts, like in this case, Yin and Yang. I mean, you don't think of Bjarke Ingels working with Yin and Yang, yet in this work he did. And there are other works by Big and by Bjarke Ingels which make the reading of his work a little bit complicated, and in the good sense of the word. So let's look at it. The Panda House Observation Center that he built in Denmark. From this image, you don't quite see the Yin and Yang. And also, why did he use the Yin and Yang? And he refers to Yin and Yang explicitly in the description of the project for the Panda House, where you have the pandas. Apparently, well, anyway, I should not anticipate, I will read about it. But apparently the pandas are very selective, and it's essentially about the love of two pandas, a masculine panda and a feminine panda. And maybe that's what made Bjarke Ingels think of Yin and Yang. You see here one panda, we don't know is a masculine one or a feminine one, but is alone. And the Danes are staring at him or her or it from above. Here we are beginning to see, the Yin and Yang. And I think Bjarke Ingels and Big did a good job here, to bring such serious pair of opposites like Yin and Yang, this kind of conceptualization into this kind of, for this kind of function, I think shows imagination and a certain complexity, I think. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the work of Bjarke Ingels is more than what it might appear at the first sight. I don't know why these trees seem to be desolate, and is it how pandas like the trees, or I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Yes, they are sculptural, and yes, they are moving like this, like skeletons. But you look at these trees here, and they are different. So these are trees as if they belong to Hiroshima in 1945 or 1946, when it was bombed. Ornamental design on the enclosure by Big, and here we have two pairs of lovers, some older ones, some younger ones, embracing each other, maybe without probably knowing what Bjarke Ingels and Big wrote about this panda, this house of panda. Here we have future lovers, two young children, he and the she. Anyway, and now we see the conceptual drawings. We see the yin and yang here. It's always a source of dynamic configurations, the meeting between two opposite forces. Always, if you want to create some kind of a turmoil or some kind of something life, if you want to create life, you bring a he and a she into play. A two-ness. Actually, I read that Goethe, the great German poet, had this belief that all the plants of the world were born from an Ur-plant, a primordial plant, for which he searched himself in the Black Forest of Germany. And he believed that this Ur-plant, the primordial plant, has a built-in duality. Well, that's what we are talking about here in the yin and yang symbol. It's a built-in duality. So the circular shape fits perfectly between the existing facilities, including the Nordic area, the monkey house, the new central square, and the elephant house. The panda enclosure is divided into two separate areas for Mao, San, and Xing following the yin and yang symbol. This is a description coming from Big. And here we see the pandas' mutual dependence, yin yang. Pandas are extremely selective. Natural breeding has only occurred in a few zoos outside of China. Pandas' mutual dependence, yin yang, to increase probability of reproduction, the pandas should not be able to see, hear, or even smell each other most of the year. Now, this is interesting, and this makes me think of what Andy Warhol, the North American artist, said that, perhaps we should, I don't even know if he used the word perhaps, he said, we should fall in love with our eyes closed. Because it is true, the eye could be problematic. You are seduced by the beauty of someone, but that seductiveness could be misleading sometimes. Yes, maybe it's best to fall in love with the eyes closed. It seems the pandas went even further to fall in love, not only not seeing, but also not hearing and not even smelling the other one. But that would be difficult to do. Although for the Orthodox Jews, and I lived in an area in Brooklyn, New York, with many Orthodox Jews, apparently they get married not because of love, it's because their parents marry them when they are children. So you get married or engaged to someone by your parents, not by yourself. It's not based on romantic love. And what is surprising is that they don't have divorces. Now, maybe the divorce is not accepted in their community. That is also possible, but it seems it works. So let's imagine, you get married not based on romantic love, not because you love someone, but because your parents found a mate for you. And when you become at a certain age, you get married to that someone whom you didn't know before. And, so in other words, love is at the end of a process of knowing each other and not at the beginning. You get married not because you love, but you love because you get married. Interesting and strange. Anyway, the pandas seem to be happy in this graphic representation. Okay, so here is a view from the top, and we see the two-ness of this architectural work by Big and by Bjarke Ingels. by the way of Yin and Yang. But you saw they themselves refer to Yin and Yang. Now the Yin and Yang museums by Stephen Holl, which were not built or the building started, something happened. I tried hard to find images. I thought I saw somewhere something, but I couldn't find today. I will show a few images of the project. The Yin and Yang museums by Stephen Holl. The Tianjin Eco City Ecology and Planning Museums by Stephen Holl Architects. We'll look at some sketches. Here the Yin and Yang motif is less clearly observable, noticeable, but it's literally about the void and the its opposite, and there are two buildings that mentally at least you could bring them together into some kind of a wholeness or unity. So it is indirectly and more subtly than in the work, the previous work we saw about Yin and Yang. And I thought I had another drawing. Yeah, anyway, a reference to Dao. Let's read a little bit about this project. From the reclaimed salt pan and polluted tide flats of Bohai Bay in China, a new city designed for 350,000 inhabitants is being constructed from scratch, although this text, I think, was written in 2013, 9 years ago. The ambitious project is being realized as a collaboration between the governments of Singapore and China, with an overreaching goal of becoming a poster city for state-of-the-art sustainable aspects. With nearly a third of this new ecosystem city of Tianjin built and substantial completion project for 2020, the internationally renowned practice Stephen Holl Architects has been commissioned to design the first two buildings in the city's cultural district, the Tianjin Eco City Ecology and Planning Museums. Like the Chinese Bao Gua or Yin Yang, I never saw this Bao Gua anyway, Yin Yang, these forms are in reverse relations, as the Ecology Museum is the additive complement to the subtractive space of the Planning Museum. And here are the two buildings that Stephen Holl proposed. I didn't see pictures with the building site now, but let's hope they get built. It's clear what he did. Is this building is what was subtracted from this building. So yeah, it is a Yin and Yang kind of relationship. You see here the Yin and Yang symbol and the reference to all the Dao, which means the path, the way, and it's a beautiful little book, and I recommend it to anyone. The Tao of Life by Lavaux, the great Chinese mystic. China had two pillars of wisdom. One was Confucius, pragmatic, and then the mystic Lavaux. And Lavaux wrote the Tao. The Tao is a little book with only 80 sayings, very poetical and very difficult to translate. But there is so much subtle wisdom in that book that at one moment in my life it saved my life, and I'm not exaggerating. It's a beautiful book which underlines the power of the weak. In that book, the Tao, it is said in a convincing, although rather cryptical way, that what we call weak is actually powerful. And he gives the example of the blade of grass. If the thunderbolt strikes the oak, the proud, powerful oak dies, but not the blade of grass. The blade of grass, in its fragility, it lowers its head and it endures. And the same water appears to be weak, but the truth of the matter is weak as it might appear to be, water erodes the strongest rock in time. So which one is weak? Water or the rock? The rock appears to be strong. And water, with its malleability and fluidity, appears to be weak. It's the same way about man and woman. You know, the woman is called the weak sex, but is she? In my opinion, women are not weak at all. I think they are stronger than men. So there. Anyway, interesting, this project by Stephen Holl, and I really hope it gets built. It looks more somehow sensitive and interesting in the sketch than in the models, but anyway. Now, Stephen Holl, again, the Y house. It's you see the two-ness is here in the two sides of letter Y, and it's literally a Y house. You see here the splitting, the rift between the two sides, the split between the two sides. And there is also, so we have the two-ness of the volumes and meaning in space and in plan, but we also have the two-ness, the chromatic two-ness or duality, the green of nature and the redness of the house. And the red and green are opposed to each other. And if you don't believe it, or if you don't know it so-called theoretically, it's very simple to verify that it is so. You look at an intense red spot, and then you move your eyes towards a white wall, and you will see the same spot, but green. How do you explain it? There is no green there on the white wall. There is something within us, and this was discovered by Goethe, that if you look at a color in excess, and then you move your eyes towards a white surface, let's say a white wall, you see the opposite of that color. Interesting, no? It is as if in nature operates some kind of a system that needs balance, needs harmony, needs, in a way, peace out of conflict, of an excess. Here are the drawings of this interesting house by Stephen Holl. I think the speculative aspect of architecture is often ignored or insufficiently addressed. I truly believe that if Johann Huizinga was right, that a culture which avoids its ultimate aim, metaphysics, does so. If it avoids metaphysics, it ceases to be culture. And I also believe that Alvarado was right. Architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. So as I wrote some time ago, the only conclusion I can arrive at is that architecture cannot avoid its metaphysical attribute or aim, perhaps, even aim. But exactly metaphysics are ignored most of the time. Here, in the case of Stephen Holl, metaphysics are still present. He whimsically called this the Y house, although it's not it's a distorted Y, it's not a literal, externalization, visually speaking, of letter Y, but there is a complexity that has a metaphysical side to it, and this should be acknowledged and seen. It's an interesting house. It's also a house that probably testifies about the inner conflict of anyone, the dualities of everyone, because I think every human being has dualities, of all kinds. It is said that a human being has an animus and an anima within. There is a male in the woman and there is a woman in the male, in the various percentages. So maybe the duality of the human being, any human being, Like Faust declares in Goethe again, alas, two souls are dwelling in my heart. Well, those two souls that were dwelling in the heart of Faust are present in this building by Stephen Holl. Even here, there is some kind of a yin and yang. There are two sides of this building. They are also connected in this area, but you see, they are not identical. There are differences. You could say this is the female, this is the male, or maybe the opposite. I don't know, but it's an interesting and engaging building. I like it. On the other hand, the conflict between man and nature is shown chromatically. The house is red, and I think even the so-called green architecture, conceptually speaking, it's essentially red, even when it claims it is green, because it's an artifact. It's something built by human beings. It's not made by the gods or by nature. Conceptually, so to speak, it's red. In its essence, any house, even if it's totally green, you know, in its appearance and in its sustainable or ecological aspirations, essentially it's still red. Now, I think this building by Stephen Holl is kind of honest in this sense. Interesting house by an interesting architect, and to call him interesting is perhaps not enough. Now, of course, the functionalist, I'm not referring to Alberto Sartoris, would comment negatively about this space. What's going on in this voided V, you know? Well, in itself is some kind of a, you know, penetration. You know, it's as if the exterior tries to enter the interior, and it's, yes, you say it's dark and what's going on here, but even this space I find you know, stimulating. And although again the Apollonic or Apollonian functionalist would protest, would say this is a lost space or whatever. No, no, and no again. Now the self-sufficient Yin and Yang house that incorporates gardens on its interlocking roof can be seen here. It's a project, was not built. The studio founded by architects Chris Precht and Dae Yong Sun, I guess someone Chinese there, designed the Yin and Yang house for a young family that wants to live and work in the countryside. The clients also want to live off-grid and are targeting a self-sufficient lifestyle, meaning that they plan to produce most of their own food at home. This is a noble aspiration. I don't know if easily arrivable at, but this is the house. Towards the outside is almost monolithic, but inside it's a different story. And let's look at the plan. Where is the plan? Here is the plan. So the Yin and Yang is shown in the plan. Maybe, you know, I mean, a little bit transform the whole scheme, because in the Yin and Yang, in the traditional Yin and Yang, there is a roundness around this. Here, the roundness is implicated only within the square or the rectangular plan, but it is an interesting house still. And let's now go back to some pictures. Yeah. Here we also have the duality between the plane of the earth and the erected vertical walls and the garden above. So the garden above recuperates something that was lost at the level of the earth by building the building. So here we have also the duality man and nature, or building and nature. It's a project. I don't know if it will be built, but I thought it was worthy of being shown here on the occasion of the 2nd of February, 2022. Okay, now we go to John Hejduk. John Hejduk was the dean at Cooper Union in New York, and he was one of the New York Fives. The other four being Peter Eisenman, Charles Gwynne, Michael Graves, and Richard Meyer. John Hejduk built the list, but he built this house for two brothers in Berlin, which is a rather strange building. This is the maddening plan. And maddening it is. I don't know if there is another building with so many doors in a rather tight, rectangular, actually square plan. It's, I think here is needed Dr. Freud to psychoanalyze this plan. I find it maddening, but you'll see the building from the outside. It was built in Berlin. It's something, yes, as I said, maddening about this building. This is the house for one brother. This is the house for the other brother. And let's look at it. It's obviously a house for two, for two families or two people. Now, if they are brothers or not, they're identical, the two. As opposed to Stephen Holl, who split the house, but in two parts which are not identical, these are perfectly identical, and in an almost, unsettling way, if not to say irritating. John Hejduk, I think, had SM tendencies, if I'm allowed to say so. There is something sadomasochistic in this architectural configuration. But he was a unique architect, and his books on architecture are very, very nice as books with watercolors and sketches and poems even written by him. Anyway. Now, when the ivy attacks the buildings, the ivy doesn't care about the perfect symmetry. And as you can see, this side of the ivy development, if I am to call it so, is different from this side, and it's good that it is. Nature has a freedom which we human beings do not have. Now, this is not a house for two brothers, but it was also built by John Hejduk. And we see two nests here as well. This is also very almost unique, because most architects would build the roof the other way. Here the water is channeled towards the center of the house. So this elevation, which is almost like a face with the eyes and the nose and the mouth, it shows a split being. It's the double, maybe the Dostoevskian double in a, John Hejduk interpretation. It's the divided human being. It's split, and it's rather provocative, this elevation too, and not just from a functional or functionalist point of view. Here is the, there are cartoons on the web where this elevation of this building is transformed into, a cartoon of the face of a cat or something. It's, we can talk about it. Anyway, even this is about two-ness or duality, I would say, although this is not the house for two brothers. Now we arrive at Gordon Matta Clark, almost unavoidable or unavoidably, because this man, who was the son of a great painter, became a very interesting force in art. Unfortunately, he died young. He split a building. He cut it into two, and you wonder, why did he do it? Well, maybe in quest for truth, a truth which an unsplit, undivided house does not tell. Because I think the dualities exist in all of us, more ample or less ample, but they do exist. This is what Gordon Matta Clark did to the poor building. It was probably an abandoned building, but I think he worked here because, you know, I see here it's still, I don't know if, it might be that this was done in a more complicated way. You see, this is not, you know, a continuation of this. So I don't know how, I mean, I understand he cut the building here, but it seems he also, you see, because this is a 90 degrees angle, this is, maybe he worked on this. It's possible. Anyway, it's considered an artwork, and I don't know if it still exists, but it's a famous work by the famous Gordon Matta Clark. This is probably the same, but in reverse, the picture. It's possible that it's just a question of photography, but it does talk to us about the schism within all of us, and that schism exists. This is another house done in the same way. Okay, and now we go to double duplex by these architects. You know, I'm talking about two-ness. It's not, it can be more easy to do so than in this case. You know, but you can compare this building, this pair of buildings with what John Hejduk did. Even the X itself is made of two elements, is it not? So there is some kind of two-ness in the X as well, which is inside the building. Here there are interesting things which don't have anything to do with the theme architecture and the duality, except you know, the split between the two buildings. But look at the graffitis on the walls. Why not? Towards the street, you don't imagine what we just saw here. But we'll see also the plan of this house, the two house. It's a good building, I would say, or a good pair of buildings. And here is the plan. I mean, one floor, because it has 3 floors or so. An interesting idea now, of course, you know, separating two buildings in this way would create some loss of energy here, because if you put them together, you know, sharing one wall, you'd have had a little bit less energy lost. I guess they didn't think of energy here, you know, and you wonder what they thought about. But the split has its value, aesthetical, philosophical, poetical. It does have its value, I would say. And now we go to the Kiasma, another work by Stephen Holl, a very interesting work. And Kiasma means some kind of an intersection between two entities. In Greek, Kiasma Museum of Contemporary Art in Helsinki, in Finland, which he won the competition and he built it. And is one of his best works still, although it's an earlier work. Look at the plan, talking about dualities. Well, we could say this is the male, this is the female, or vice versa. But I mean, you would say this is more passive and this is more active. But from another point of view, if the male is rational and the woman is irrational, then this is the male and this is the female. Again, it's hard to tell, but it's an interesting plan, and the building was built just as you see in the plans. It was built like this, and here is another view of the two-ness of the Kiasma Museum of Contemporary Art in Helsinki, by built in the proximity of a very famous building by Alvarado, the Philharmonia, or the Philharmonic building, truly a very important building by Alvarado. So a very challenging proximity, but Stephen Holl worked brilliantly, I would say. This is the building. So again, Is this the male and this the female? Or is it vice versa? The woman is passive and cold, as we saw on that diagram, although I'm not inclined to think so at all. And this is the tumultuous male, continuously uneasy with himself and continuously searching for new horizons. It could be read in both ways, but it's a good building, and I had the chance to see it in so-called reality. The Kiasma Museum of Contemporary Art in Helsinki, Finland, by Stephen Holl. Okay, and now this is a view from the interior, and in the interior you see the duality as well. You know, there is conflict, there is tension, there is something that is shown in the plans and is shown in the exterior as well. So the interior is expressing what the exterior is expressing as well. And now we arrive at the double helix chapel. This is the last part of this presentation on architecture and two-ness. This is a double helix. I could have given many examples of double helixes in architecture. Of course, the word double is direct, reference to the theme of this presentation, architecture and two-ness. Hiroshi Nakamura and NEP in Japan, they built this. There are two spiraling elements that lead to the top, and a lot of marriages take place here, and of course appropriately so, because it's about marrying the sun with the moon, the north with the south, the feminine with the masculine, and so on. Yin and Yang, this is a section through the building, circling each other like in a tensioned tango, you know, the lady and the man, you know, the woman and the man, you know, circling each other, and then finally meeting at the top and getting married and eternally happy. The spiral also is necessary as a symbol of becoming. So it's not a static reality, it's a dynamic quality. You could say it's the house of romantic entanglement. You know, it's circling each other, and this is part of anyone's life. I would say it's a good building, and it's yes, it's a manifesto in a way, but it's brilliantly built. And what can we say? Japan again is showing us that architecture can be done in many ways, and they continue to experiment. That's it for today. I thank you very much. And if you want to talk about something, let's do so. Thank you.